Okay, good morning everyone. Can you all hear me okay? I'm Malcolm Senior, I'm the IT Director at Taunton and Somerset NHS Trust, and we're going to talk about our recent implementation of the openMAXIMS EPR. I'm joined today by Dr. Chris Swinburn, who's been our clinical lead on the programme right from the very start, and Chris will be adding some insight and comment as we go along. And also, you all know Shane, who's the CEO of IMS MAXIMS, although this year he's grown a beard so that you won't recognise him, but Shane's here and he'll be chipping in as well as we go through the presentation. So just want to give a bit of background first to our trust. We're a 600-bed medium-sized acute hospital in Somerset. We originally used the old NHS Swift PAS. So back in the sort of mid-90s, everybody used NHS written software. So we used this software. It was worked alongside clinicians with our own members of staff, and it kind of feels like that was a first open source. We actually did all this stuff in the NHS all those years ago. So we were used to that kind of working. We moved to MP Fit Surney Millennium in December 2007, like a lot of people did. And then we've just implemented MAXIMS over the weekend of the 27th and 28th of September. I think the key issue for the trust really in all this was, whatever you say about MP Fit, it was free. So the problem we had come the end of October when the contract expired was that we had a big bill potentially, because we were moving from a zero cost into cost, and our trust, like all trusts, is facing financial difficulties. So there was kind of an issue for us really, so we had to put a lot of effort into looking at what our options were. You've been to lots of these presentations before about what's the secret of success, and I'd like to be able to say, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's 42 or it's some kind of magical figure. You can all go away, and if you just do something in a special way, it all works. But as I found on a number of occasions, it just doesn't. It's just hard work. So all these EPRs are, it's just hard work, dedication, teamwork, inclusion, attention to detail, endless practice, and basically you've got to plan well and stick to the plans. We were particularly focused on the fact that if we weren't off the Cerner software by the end of the 31st of October 2015, we'd have particular problems and maybe some financial penalties as well. So we were particularly focused on the need to get off our existing software by that day. And I mean, whatever your badge or whatever your poster you like, we put those things up there because it really is just about hard work. And I mean, Shane, I don't know whether you've got a view about hard work and how these things are done, or from your experience.
There's no shortcut. And many people in this room, I recognise some faces, many people have been through implementations that are really significant. But we can overcomplicate things. And I think we've all discussed this slide, and many people in this room have sat through many years of presentations just about implementations. We're cramming it down into 5 points. It's decent, honest, hard work. It's keeping your team alongside you. At one of the briefings during the go live, I remember one of the quotes back to the briefing was, "There's a lady down in theatres, she's proper on it." And that's evidence of people knowing their stuff. So they've done their rehearsals, they've done the good work, and the results of those hard work come when you actually go live, and you can see it in people.
Thank you, Shane. Okay, so pick on this theme that we're talking about the future of electronic records and the open source, and this DeLorean car, this Back to the Future thing's been in the news recently, where the clock was set for this magical date of October 2015, where they were kind of predicting what would happen, and they got things like iPads. It was marvellous, really. The film predicted the use of things like iPads, but they totally didn't get the fact that we wouldn't have hoverboards, and neither would the NHS have moved from the use of paper records, so they missed out on a few things. So for me, this kind of resonated, because don't set the clock forward, actually set the clock back. This thing, that point I made at the start, that for us in the Southwest, we'd use these Swift systems where clinicians and admin staff had worked alongside programmers to develop functionality that really works. So we got an integrated piece of software right across theatres, A&E, obviously we've got the PAS, we've got pathology, we've got maternity, theatres. It was a full integrated suite of systems that we'd use, and we did that ourselves, and it was popular and clinicians loved it. So for me it was kind of this thing about open source has this badge that it's a bit risky, and actually for me this was about more going back to where I thought the NHS had got it right and wanted to move back to that. And Peter Coates is speaking later about Code for Health, but Code for Health really is just picking up on what we did back in 1995. So whoever was the IT director around those times, those were the guys to me with the real vision, and we're just sort of going back in time almost to sort of pick up on what they've done. So IMS, really, why did we pick IMS? Well, the first thing you've got to say is that the software's got to be good because clinicians won't use it. This thing about clinicians not taking to software, the feedback I always get, if the software was good, we'd use it. So I don't know, Chris, whether you've got a view about clinicians and the software, what they think about IMS?
They like this very much. They didn't like what we had before, I have to say that, and they wouldn't really engage with it for a number of reasons. They find it intuitive, easy to use, clear screens, quick. But then, in a sense, that's not over-surprising because many of them were involved in the design of the functionality and of the screens. And if they weren't, well, they'd certainly all seen it several times before go live. So when we did go live, there were no surprises in it for them. No, they like it. They like it very much. So it's been a big improvement in their eyes, what we have developed. One particular they like is that the local configurability down to departmental level, which we can do ourselves, just a phone call and 20 minutes later it's done to suit them. They particularly like that. You haven't got a fixed product which it's very difficult to fiddle with. You can really do an awful lot yourselves locally, and that gets huge buy-in and actually improves the functionality hugely.
Thank you, Chris. And for me, the other advantage right from the start, I think that Shane was open and honest, and I like the way that so we did business. And we looked each other in the eyes many times and said, look, we haven't just got to sign a contract here, we've got to implement this damn thing, and it's going to be tricky, and we need to make sure that we truly do work in partnership. We talk about partnership all the time in the NHS and in the public sector, and we just don't do it. We don't actually walk the talk. So I was keen with Shane that we really got into that. I don't know whether you had a view about how that went, Shane.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am going to say that an organisation's job is to sell products, but actually I think a supplier's job it's one of education. It's to inform and be informed. I think my personal job is to learn of what the needs are, what the changing challenges are in policy, in your local challenges individually, and to translate that into something that we offer. And then it's for people making the decisions, the team that's running the procurement, to be informed, and it's their responsibility for the next generation. I think what's peculiar about Taunton was they'd only had this particular product for 7 years, and those that have been in the industry know that actually a couple of decades is probably more than norm. So I was really impressed with the appetite, the energies in the pre-contract stages of the entire organisation, looking across. And it wasn't just looking at product, it's how are we going to use it, and we'll come back to that in another part of your presentation. But open and honesty, I'd like to think that's all we do, and if we do it properly, people will make the right decision. But you're right, that honesty starts before the contract, and it has to be at the most senior levels, because the people on the ground have to look each other in the eyes, and I know Malcolm will come back to more, because there are times you've got to have difficult conversations, and if you've got mutual respect, then yes, you cringe when those things aren't maybe going the way you want to, but then you can get straight to it, and you can do something really constructive. And I think that was a key part of our success, is when we had a lot of it's perception, but if you don't have good communication channels, honest and open respect, then it makes things more difficult.
Thanks, Shane. So teamwork, I hope you can see, these guys are the Searle brothers. I don't know if you remember, they were gold winners in the Cox pairs. And Greg's a local guy to Somerset, so what Greg does, he comes along to our trust improvement days and he talks about motivation, he talks about teamwork and how you've all got to do your bit, and he's really big on this thing that you've got to understand, you know, from a row's perspective, why you're in that boat, what's it all about, what's going to motivate you, because if you don't do your bit, then you lose out. So he always talks about, you know, you don't blame in a team, but you do challenge. You've got to do that. And the big thing that for Greg, when they were winning their gold medal, they were behind, I think it was the Germans or somebody, and they all had to dig deep. And the point was, you know, you do your bit. If not you, who? If not now, when? And that kind of resonates with a lot of people, because actually change and stuff only happens if you get off your backside and you do these things. You're the one that's really driving. So everybody's got a personal responsibility. So for me, I know it's obvious to talk about teamwork, but it's surprising. I've been in loads of major projects where people actually don't work as a team, where you get people sort of breaking out and being different factions. And I've been really proud about the way that when our time came, we did it right. Everybody pulled together and we worked as a team. From the top down, everybody did their bit. So for me, it was a really good experience. And Shane, I don't know, what was it like for you guys?
Well, the thing about teamwork is it's not just all pulling together. What I find, it's a bit like when the geese are flying in their V shape, and the guy at the front is working really hard, and then there's a constant movement of people moving up. And what I regularly saw across our teams, and it does feel like an integrated team, is that when somebody was struggling, the people who'd worked with them side by side for months noticed that, and they step up, they step forward. That's what teamwork meant for me. And it gave that person who'd been out at the front a little bit of support, encouragement, but we were all heading in that great direction. And I'm not saying this is a cliche, it's absolutely fact. These were my observations as I came down regularly throughout the whole project.
The other thing that was really good was that we recruited a team of people from the business, and they started with the business from the procurement stage, and they stayed with it throughout. So normally you get an attrition rate where people just have had enough, and projects are really, there's lots of ups and downs and difficult times. But it's a real testament to the people that have been seconded onto the project from the front line, that every single one of them have stuck with it. And there's too many actually to mention, but it was really great that not one person decided this wasn't for them. They've all dug in, they've all done their bit, and they've all stayed in the boat. No one tried to climb out halfway through the race, which has been fantastic. Okay, so picking up on this theme of teamwork and inclusion, I mean, this is the thing that people like Chris have been great, because when you're in IT and you go speak to doctors, you don't really speak their language. I mean, I don't really speak English as a Yorkshireman, but kind of what Chris and his colleagues have done from the front line is they've got that credibility, and they've got that sort of connection and that understanding of the business that we don't have. So we've pulled staff in to play those key roles. We've had a very small, light touch of project managers. You know, when we did Cerner first time round, we flooded the place with project managers. And actually, for the business, it just didn't work. There was just too many IT people going at it. We needed to have people owning it from the business. So we've changed it and done it this way around. And I think there's been a significant engagement from all people in the trust. But I guess, Chris, really, do you think we've had that engagement? Do you think it's worked well? It's been better than before?
I think it's worked very well, because I'm not an IT person. I can barely turn a computer on. Well, I can just about do that now, but that in the role I do, I see that as an advantage, because people do trust me about that. If I can do it, they can do it, sort of thing. The previous program 7 years ago, I was a jobbing clinician. I recall no explanation. We knew something was happening. We knew what the name of it was. We didn't know why, and we didn't know how it would affect us. We had no involvement with it, and when it came, not surprisingly, none of us really used it anyway, and that's how it was. So this time we did it completely differently. Malcolm's already explained in terms of clinical staff, but these other people were doing it in their zones as well. We had a lot of engagement. Personally, we set up a member of every department, every clinical department. So we had one named consultant who we called a link clinician, and we met with those for breakfast meetings once a month. I would pass information to them for them to disseminate to their department, but equally I wanted input and feedback from their department back into the program to influence really what we were doing, how we go about it, the design. I visited each of these departments and made presentations 4 times in the last 12 months, including showing the software in its early forms and indeed in its later forms, so that when Big Bang came, well, it wasn't Big Bang, it was a partial implementation of EPR. When D-Day came, they'd all seen it before anyway, so it was a little bit like the budget. If you're going to do something in the budget which might cause stress in the population, like edge up taxes here and there, it's always leaked before, and then on the day it just goes straight through, and that's very much how it was for us. They all knew exactly what was coming. We had open days in the trust as well, lots of newsletters, so everybody had opportunity, and they made use of that, and I think it made it a much easier go live.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so in reality, Chris has touched on some of that already, that people knew the business, and I think the best example of how this worked practically was when before go live, we did a big open day in our academy at the trust, and we invited everybody to come along. We had 500 people turn out from across the trust, and Shane had a couple of guys from IMS who probably normally would demo the system, but honest to God, none of them touched the computer all day. And Chris was brilliant. I made Chris put a blue t-shirt on with his EPR sort of team on it, and Chris demoed to clinicians all day. I think we gave you a glass of water at lunchtime, but apart from that, Chris really stuck at it. And not just Chris, all the workstream leads actually took the lead on demonstrating the software to their colleagues. So we changed that culture around from a supplier coming in and saying, this is what we're going to do to you, to our team all being there saying, this is how it is, this is what we're going to do. We also had our team that were configuring the system, building the system, explaining how they were going to build it, how they're going to try and get the drop-down menus right for each clinical team. So you didn't get this great big drop-down menu, you got one that was focused around the work that you did, the coding, the clinics that you did. And that engagement was really great, and that really got that ownership around the trust. So the time we got round to training people, we'd already got that ownership, and the product was well received, so we'd already got feedback. And Chris and his team played a massive part in that we could never have done in IT. Shane, I don't know if you've got
If I may add, and it was an immensely proud moment in my career to walk into that room of 50 or 60 people hosting the 560 or so during the day. I can't underestimate Chris's effort to get involved and speak to anybody at any level on any subject. And there was natural hesitation, as there are when people are going to change. And it's, well, is that going to add to my clinic? Because I don't have enough time anyway. And if I may quote you, Chris, you did your homework and said, yes, I've worked that out. I know how much it's going to save you in time in your clinic. And he was able to do that because he'd done his own homework. But for me, there was two of my guys, Oliver and Dean, doing a fabulous job. I was a complete wallflower observing, but the enthusiasm of the team was fabulous. And as a supplier, that's what I want. That's the mark of true partnership, because I don't believe suppliers can do it to an organisation. I think you have to have ownership, and that was some of the first major evidence of it for me.
And I mean, there were challenges. I wouldn't like to just say that this was smooth all the way through. Some of the challenges for me were the fact that we'd pulled relatively inexperienced project people into the project that weren't used to the ups and downs of projects, because it is very much like a roller coaster ride. So we used to describe it as such, and we also had this thing, because they were so dedicated, they thought they had to be at the bird at the front of the flock, flying all the time. So we used this philosophy of picking up on the Olympics again, the old cycling velodrome, where someone's at the front pedalling like hell while other people behind take a break. And we tried to emphasise to people on the project that it's your turn to drop to the back. You've done your bit. Don't think you've got to stay at the front, because otherwise some of these guys would have burnt themselves out. They were so dedicated and focused to the trust, they were trying to do too much. And building on that, doing too much, it was scope creep. If we could just do this, if we could add this would make it even better. So we had a go live originally in May, and we ended up going live in September, largely because we had some issues around data migration, which everybody does, but also because we were always trying to drive for perfection. We'd had 7 years of using Cernaware, and it's no one's fault. We didn't really take to it as an organisation. We knew we had to change because we just couldn't make it work. And people were conscious of not introducing something that people would say, oh, it's the same as we had before. And so there was that need perpetually for people to just keep trying to improve it. And that really, I think that was the sort of the key challenge. I don't know whether, Shane, you had any other...
Yeah, my key thing was we went for a May go live. It gave us 6 months before that deadline to be away from the previous product. But as we were approaching that, the opportunity was to work with the individual work streams. The relationship was so good, it wasn't just meeting the requirements, it was saying, right, how can we really improve what you're doing? And we genuinely looked each other in the eyes as organisations and said, can we take this opportunity a little bit more? For me, I thought it was an investment in time. Now, if you'll see some of the reports, it'll be, well, actually, board papers say the project's been delayed. And this isn't me putting my spin on it. No, we invested some time to make it that bit better. But also there has to come a line in the sand. And I'll say to my people won't stop. If you ask them, can we have a little bit more? They'll say absolutely, because they want to give you the best possible product. But there is a point where you have to say, okay. And if I remember rightly, Malcolm, we moved the go live, jointly decided we'll go for July. And we got to July date and went, well, hang on, everyone's booked to go on holiday. And you can't just cancel people's holidays. And then you've got the intern, the people coming in. And that's when we ended up in September. Now, on a project that is replacing your core systems, that was around 12 months to start with, to move it, to invest another couple of months, I'd like to think, Chris, that the outcome is that we're in a much, much better place.
Absolutely right. I mean, it would have been a bit of a stretch. I think we would have compromised ourselves if we'd gone earlier. There wasn't any need to go earlier because we had control over it. We still had 4 or 5 weeks spare when we did go live, and I think you just got a much better quality go live. And I think there's just a lot of last minute detail, and I think the other thing I can't emphasize enough is training. I mean, you live in a virtual bubble, I have found, when you work in an EPR department in your discrete building. A bit like Dr. Strangelove, you could start thinking, you control the world and it's all going to happen just as... But out there's 4,000 staff who've all got to be trained, all of them, and that's a mammoth task, and I think we would have compromised on that, let alone any other work we were doing on the system. If we'd gone live by July, we don't underestimate the time to train the organisation, because that is another hurdle at which, however hard you've worked for the last 3 years, you shortchange that, you have the most torrid time of it at go live. So training needs lots and lots of time.
Okay, so thanks very much. Conscious of time, I'll try and get through some of these. So attention to detail, Shane mentioned at the start, you've got to be diligent. And that started at the procurement stage, really, and making sure we were clear on what we wanted to buy and how we did it. We didn't want to get back into any old deals later on. We wanted to make sure everything could be covered through the contract. But we wanted Shane to be flexible about what we implemented, what we stuck with, what we integrated, what worked well for us and we weren't going to swap out. So we wanted that flexibility, and so we started with that vision in mind at the start, and Shane's been really great and his team about accommodating that. And then we've already covered this, that frontline staff worked alongside IMS going back to the old 1995, where it was admin staff, clinical staff working alongside the programmers to get this right, actually demoing the software along the way, and that detail we got into grew respect from both teams. And we involved loads of people from the trust. We pulled endless people in to do testing, to look at the software, to actually sign off, the clinicians to sign off that the extra stuff that Chris wanted them to do in outpatients, they were going to do. Because what you don't want to do is go live and then say we're not going to use that. So Chris did a load of sessions with people on the new functionality we did to be more paperless in outpatients, and people went with it. So that was really good. I like all these things, practice, and Chris talked about the training, and in fact we've got to get through 4,000 people, and that was a big ask in itself. We decided as well to provide a sandpit for people, so once they'd been trained, we gave them the same login. They could play on a sandpit on the internet, and that was cleaned down every night, so they could go in every morning with the stuff they'd been trained on and could play with it, and they could do that right up to go live. And they just have to remember what their training password was and go in and just do all kinds of scenarios. And that worked really well, because some people are trained 6 weeks before go live, and you forget these things. So we kind of did that as well, and that worked well for us. We did 2 dress rehearsals, because the first one was a bit lively.
Learning.
Yes, learning, thank you, that's it, first attempt at success. So we did a second one, and that went a lot better. And like all these things, isn't it? We've had that flexibility. When we've done these things before, you had one practice session or none, actually, previously. You just had to trust it and go live. We had 10 trial loads of data, ending up with 8 million records transferred. In only 7 of those we had an issue with that we needed manual loading. And we pulled in a team from Integris, Richard Collins and his team, to do that, because we don't do that sort of stuff every day. It's not our bread and butter, so we needed experts to come in and do that, and Richard Collins' team and Integris were really good. And as Chris has said, that multiple communications, and Chris did individual visits to what I'm classing as tricky customers. I suppose Chris would call them valued colleagues, but Chris... So I was really grateful to Chris for doing that, because that took the heat off me. Normally I'd have to do that and take a beating, but Chris took all those beatings on my behalf, and I'm forever grateful to you, Chris. It was really good. So what did we do? Well, the key thing for us was that we had to do this in phases. We'd seen that some trusts were trying to do a big bang, but culturally I've also in the NHS that big bang's not an easy thing to do. So the first thing was to safely transition from our Cerner legacy. So we had PARS status A&E. We wanted to go paperless somewhere, so therapies. I don't know, did they get the long straw or the short straw? They went the short, and then they went paperless, and so all our therapy departments are paperless, OTs, physios, and that's working well. And Chris started this thing about clinicians and frontline staff leading the way. I would never have dared to ask the consultants to do some of more the RTT outcoming and some of the stuff that they might see as admin stuff on outpatients, but Chris got them to do it. So actually, it was quite a good rules by Chris to get more of that functionality in, but it is a precursor to us for phase 2, where it's going to be totally paper-light outpatients. And of course, for us, the fact that, I know Chris said we got 5 weeks to play with, the fact that we went live September and we had to be off the contract by end of October, I must confess to sleepless nights and nervous moments that we were going to do that, because you always worry, but it went well in the end. So phase 2 for us is to build on what we've done in phase 1. People like nursing and outpatients is where we want to get to. We want to get our nursing staff all doing their outcoming, all doing their assessments, all doing their noting, all those things online. The software that Shane's got enables us to do that, and it's just a case of implementing that. And then phase 3, it's getting into e-prescribing. Shane's product doesn't have a built-in prescribing solution, so we're looking at whether or not we do open source with Moran. We're looking at whether we link with the GPs, with EMIS, or whether we actually do something that's a hybrid of those things, and we've got that flexibility to do that. And then, yeah, we're confident that we'll have all that in place by 2018. So, some thoughts for the future, really. Well, yeah, I suppose you've got to learn lessons from the past and apply them. It's all about being open and common. I'm showing my sort of northern roots there about open and common, but I'll explain that in a minute. And then it's maintaining that involvement we've got. Sometimes you go live and it's all too easy to put people back in the business and say, well, thank God for that, we've gone live, let's go back to how we were. But actually it's worked so well that we've got to invest in these people to keep them with the programme. And I've done this little bit of a diagram because for me, there's all these NHS organisations out there, and we don't often think about making sure we can communicate. And so we're all now with the sort of the benefit of the cancellation of the national programme, we're all able to go out, use tech fund money and buy what we want. But with that comes the responsibility to make sure that these things can interoperate. And some trusts do that and some don't. I think we've got to make sure that we do that and get that right. So picking up on that theme, this thing with MP Fit, that one size doesn't fit all, we get that, but actually one standard should. And I went to an HSJ event a couple of weeks ago, and I was really taken by the fact this guy came from the airline industry, and he was talking how all the competing airline industries had managed to agree common standards on ticketing and all kinds of things. So all these big competing multinationals had sat together and agreed to common standards. Why can't we in the NHS, why can't we in the public sector here do that across health and social care? It's a bit embarrassing really that all these bloody private companies could and we couldn't. So we've got that flexibility, as I've said, to select and develop individual systems, but with that comes the responsibility that we've all got to do to make sure that we can enable that data sharing that we all know will improve patient care and benefit patients. So picking up on this, it's about being open and common. I mean, for me, what I meant by that was open source, open systems, open architecture, open APIs, and working to common standards so that we can actually share data, we can interoperate. That's what it's all about now. It's about having that ability, and all suppliers have to come to that table, I think, and engage with that. But if you don't, if you're a bit spooked by this sort of open source thing, actually you've got the option. You can go to Shane and say, well, I'll have a standard contract, thanks very much. And Shane has got contracts like that with people like Ramsey who've said, I'm not really interested in open source. I just want this to work for the company. So they're doing stuff like that. We've picked up this thing as well with the Kick, where we've got a community of interest company where we've got other trusts working with us, because we don't want to just do a code set that's for Taunton. It has to be a code set for the NHS. It can't just be something that's parochial to us. We've got to think of the bigger picture. So yeah, for me, a final slide, and then we'll get to questions. Patients see one NHS, so should we. So we've got to get that. What we're doing is for the great good of the NHS. We've got to make sure that we're future-proofing any developments and things that we do. This is why with the Kick, what we want to try and do is get this standard code set that you can actually flick switches. If you want to not use certain functionality, well, don't use it. But there's a code set that we agree that's got these, working to these common international standards that enable data sharing, that enable trusts to take that one code set and do whatever they want with it. And for me, it's this thing about, we talked about back in 1995, we did all this stuff. We had these systems that we developed ourselves. We had this capability, we had this confidence, and it worked well and people liked it, they engaged with it, and we've got to get back to that time. And however you do it, whichever supplier you choose, there has to be that real effort and that collaboration where you really get your frontline staff doing that. So we've still got loads to do. We've still got many phases to go. But in terms of the old DeLorean, set the clock for 2018 and off we go, really. We're going to achieve our vision. I don't know if you two have got anything you want to add before we go to questions.
No, I don't think so. I think you've said it all. Just two other observations on involving people, involving the staff and getting their buy-in is they really have to understand what it is what you're trying to do, but why? Why are you doing it this way? What are the benefits? And when they understand why things are to be done in a certain way and what the benefits are, they're far more likely to do them. First time round 7 years ago, we were simply told to fill in those bits of paper, which was something to do with RTT, but we didn't know that. Nobody explained it, so we didn't do it. You know, people do things if they understand why. And then the other final thing is, if people have concerns, you have to fix it for them somehow, overcome their concerns and fix it. So you do, as Malcolm said, you don't just go live, you then attend to people's concerns. Some of them are genuine, some of them are just them, but you have to go on delivering that sort of reassurance, really. And I think if we continue the way we've gone with our plans for going forwards, we'll get there by 2018, and I think we'll get there very well with a very usable set of stuff to do what we want it to do. I'm very confident about the next 2 or 3 years.
Thank you. I hope it's been really interesting for the audience. As a supplier, you've not once seen my brand up there, but yet I'm sharing the platform technically with Malcolm. But I'm really grateful. I'm grateful to have worked genuinely with a great partner. This isn't flattery. This has helped me achieve a personal aspiration that I've been in this sector for 19 years directly and in 25 years in health. And my name's been mentioned a lot, but I have to say IMS MAXIMS is a team that I've been privileged to be a part of for 9 years. And the one thing that I've craved from the first 4 weeks I was here was a national reference. And what this has given us is a reference for you, the audience, to go and talk to your peers and say, how does it work for you? How can I learn from that for our challenges? And whether or not you choose an IMS MAXIMS product, anyone who knows me and has heard me speak before, I always introduce myself as first of all being a family guy who cares passionately because I've been through end-of-life care with a number of close relatives. I've brought beautiful children into the world, and we've used the majority in my family of services in the UK and Ireland, public and private. And my organisation couldn't really sell into the public sector in a major way for a number of years. We sold into the private sector successfully, and we've learnt a lot, and we've got a great product that I believe is world class, but that's for you to choose and that's for you to decide on. All I'm grateful for is we work with some fabulous people. We've developed some fabulous relationships. I'm confident these guys that whatever they set their mind to can go on and do it. And as a taxpayer, which is my second thing, before I become a CEO, I really care about that you get tremendously good value. And what I've wanted to do my entire career is show that things can be done for good value, fair day's work, fair day's pay, but you've got this amazing community across the NHS that can genuinely learn from each other. There's nothing wrong with pushing forward. My job, I don't think, will ever end because we're pushing medicine forward, we're pushing processes forward, and I can only do that by interacting with the people who need that the most. So for me, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, are there any questions at all?
Can you tell us more about your community of interest company, CIC? What's the concept and how does it work?
The concept is to have a custodian of the software, so it's really to get ownership in the NHS. So this idea that with open source you can just download it off the internet and use it if you want to. So we've got that code set now that we can do that with, but someone's got to look after it. And what we didn't want to do is just say, well, I'll tell you what, give us a few thousand, I'll look after it. We wanted to make sure that what we did was future-proofed and was actually going to be fit for purpose for those people that wanted to use the MAXIMS product. So we've created it with the idea of all the MAXIMS user trust coming together to be involved in actually in agreeing a standard code set and making sure that the software that is developed isn't just something that's parochial, but it has a wider NHS context, and it is one code set that can then be used and adopted by other people, rather than with open source, every trust downloads a single version and everybody, we end up with 50 versions of MAXIMS, which would be a nightmare. So it's back to this one NHS. So the idea is we work in partnership, we compromise where we need to do on what we develop and how we develop it and the priorities, but we share that, we own that, and we own that in the NHS, with all due respect, rather than to Shane owning it. And as we move forward, if Shane doesn't keep his sharpness and his team spirit going, then we do have options actually to help other people, to move to other people who might support that software. So it's about keeping the supplier side on their toes as well. So we talk about partnership, but actually we both got to be on it and be sharp, and it's about a commitment to a piece of software rather than a commitment to a supplier per se. That's what it's about. And NHS England, I think, have supported that, and Pete Coates in the audience here is going to be talking about Code for Health. Pete has been fantastic with Richard Jefferson and the team in supporting setting that up and to actually pump prime some of the funding for it. So we've had support from NHS England as well.
Can I respond to that as well? Just from a supplier's perspective, the latest code isn't released yet, so we've got a bit of catching up to do. We mentioned that we took the opportunity to add some more things in. So we're probably about 4 or 5 months away from where I would have liked to have been, but there should be a new code drop. And what I'll also add, although it's NHS, it's actually any organisation in the world we're going to open this up to, and that's private sector as well. And we've had a policy for a long time that any enhancements we do, we put it into the same portfolio. So Malcolm's got his NHS hat on, I've got a broader appeal, and actually that's not new for us. We were doing that, we've always done that in the last 9 years. Any developments we do, we put into the pool of the product portfolio for everybody. And there's some interesting developments coming along, because we're focused here on administrative and integrated care pathways, but actually we're doing some work on billing so that we can help get to that real life cost per transaction, if you like, in the NHS.
Okay. Well,
all right, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your time.